Good evening, everybody. I'm going to keep this very brief. I know you came here to hear Howard Dean and not me. Just a couple of observations before we ask Governor Dean to come to the podium. In my opinion, Howard Dean is one of the true bright lights of the first decade of the 21st century. I'm sure every one of you remembers what it was like back in the year 2000, culminating in December of 2000 in the Supreme Court decision that put George Bush in the White House.
Worst of all time.
It didn't get any better for a while. I remember perhaps even more depressing the 2002 midterm elections, when we didn't have a presidential candidate who was not addressing the issues that the American people were concerned about. But we had an opposition party that demonstrated very little backbone in doing that itself. And in that context is really when Governor Dean emerged and became the hero that he is today for us in this room and for the party and for the country. It was no longer going to be acceptable to allow the party in power to distort and pull the wool over people's eyes the way they had successfully done for a long time, not with Howard Dean out there campaigning. And no longer were we going to run politics in the United States entirely from the top down. We were going to make a major revolution in shifting to a politics begins at the grassroots and goes up from there. No question that Howard Dean laid the foundation for the successful presidential election of 2008. His work at the DNC and with the 50-state strategy, for example, is truly extraordinary. And so it's truly a great honor for me. It's very rare to get the chance to introduce someone who is really your hero. And Howard Dean, you are. We welcome you, and we appreciate you being here on this important occasion for us, our 5th anniversary. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, it's great to be here. We've had a lot of rip-roaring times in this very room and a lot of fun over the years. Secondly, let me thank Jerry, not only for his kind words, but Jerry was actually, I think I met Jerry because he was part of the first fundraiser I ever did in Washington, D.C. at Craig Hoffman's house. And it was really fun. And Jerry, thank you for being such a stalwart, incredible change agent in the country. I want to talk a little bit about the change, and then we'll do some Q&A. And if anybody's hungry or whatever, you can get up and I'm not going to get upset if you get up and walk around and stuff like that and get some food. I don't believe in talking to hungry people, so if you need some of the delicious things, you should go get them. Let me just share some statistics with you to show you what you really have done in the last 5 or 6 years. In 2004, the number of people under the age of 30 who voted went up by 20%. And 56% of them voted for John Kerry. In 2006, the number of people who are under 32 increased their voting by 24% over the previous off-year election, 2002. And 61% of all those people voted for whoever the Democratic candidate for Congress was in their district, which accounts for why we took back Congress. In 2008, for the first time in the lifetime of anyone in this room, for the first time, more people under 35 voted in the presidential election than people who were over 65. There has been an enormous change in this country. And they voted 63% for Barack Obama. Now, this is a really, really big deal. The bad news is that we're all kind of senior advisors now, and we're pushed over to the side. The good news is we have a young generation of Americans that is really very, very committed to change. This is the first multicultural generation in the history of America. Now, America's been a multicultural country for a long, long time. But this is the first generation that sees themselves as multicultural, the first generation who grew up with people who aren't like them. That, and of course, well, the first thing they did is elect a multicultural president. So, this is another, I'll tell you some other interesting things about this generation. There is less ideological bandwidth than there is in ours. You don't have a lot of people on the far right, you don't have a lot of people on the far left in this generation. They want cooperation, not confrontation. After I lost the Wisconsin primary, I said I'd get out if I didn't win, and I didn't win, so I came home and I started putting myself back together again after this tough 2-year presidential campaign. And we had a lot of discussions, and one of the things my kids looked at me, and you know, anybody who has teenage children knows just how outrageous this is. They looked at me and said, "Dad, you're just too confrontational." And it was true. It was true. Our generation is a confrontational generation. Women's rights, civil rights, voting rights, gay rights, the beginnings of which were in the 60s. We stood up and we fought against our parents' generation over a lot of issues. And it did make us confrontational. This new generation, you know, we got 1 million people on the mall in Washington from time to time. They send 1 million emails to Congress and shut the place down for 3 days. Not such a bad technique. But their message to us is we should stop fighting about these things that you've been fighting about for 30 years and start to work together to get something done. Now, both generations are important, but it's also important that they climb onto our shoulders and live a different life than we did. That's why we did what we did. I can remember when my wife had graduated from high school in 1971 from Roslyn High School in suburban New York. There were 2 playing fields, one for the boys, one for the girls' sports. And there was a construction project that had to be done at the high school her junior year. And so they needed some extra space for construction equipment, this and that, and the other thing. So their response was simply to shut down the girls' playing field and get rid of the girls' sports for a year while they did the construction project. Nobody thought anything about it. That wouldn't happen now because of Title IX. Those are the kinds of things our generation did, and they mattered a lot. And as the president said, the idea 40 years ago that he was going to have a shot at getting elected president of the United States was something that nobody thought. And here we are today. My father once said to me, which of course I didn't want to hear, but evidently I did hear it and remember it very well. Once when he was about my age now, he said, you know, I have an advantage over you. I can look backwards as well as forward. And it's been a great 40 years that our generation has been in power. It relates to John F. Kennedy through George W. Bush. And during that time, there were some great advances made, but now it is time, as Jack Kennedy said in his inaugural address, to pass the torch to a new generation. That does not mean that we won't be activists. We will. And we will continue to be activists, we will continue to be grassroots activists, but it does mean there's a new way of doing things.